Well, our first hint was he didn't want to color in coloring books. He had a great imagination, he had a great sense of composition.
But he also has an incredible artistic flair that is, I would say, a little out of the ordinary.
I work in a school of the arts. I see a lot of talented people go through, but for his age, his level of maturity was fairly advanced.
Hi, my name is Josh Tiessen. I'm a 19-year-old artist from Stony Creek, where I have my studio gallery. I've been working on my art since 11, and I've had over 50 exhibitions. I'm fortunate to sell upwards to 80 of my paintings to national and international collectors. I'm fortunate to be able to make it full-time with selling my paintings through galleries, festivals, art fairs. I also speak in schools and occasionally do commission paintings and teach art.
It's exciting to see how Josh has received different awards, being one of the top 20 under 20, which was a huge honor for him. Another thing that Josh received was the Queen Elizabeth II Award, which was really a shock for Josh, because that was, usually people who are in their 60s or 70s or 80s, people who've done a whole lifetime of things, get that.
When I was 15, a lot of people said that my work reminded them of acclaimed wildlife artist Robert Bateman, and they suggested that I write him and say that it's a part of the Art Gallery of Burlington, and I got an invitation from him to go out to BC to study under him.
Молодец, ты уже сам, всё уже хватит, уже много. Теперь даже можешь...
I grew up in Russia. I was born in Moscow. My parents were working there as professors and doing humanitarian work as well.
I think as human beings, we all have this longing to make a difference in the world. So we wanted to go to another country that needed some help. And Russia was a country that was being reborn from the ashes of communism.
We went to Russia in '93, shortly after the Berlin Wall fell in Eastern Europe in 1989. And we could see that there was something happening in Russia, an opportunity to tell people about Christ, about telling them just about the opportunity to change their life and that they could have hope. And so we wanted to be a part of that.
We knew we were going into another country where there would be crime, dangers, where there'd be a lot of cultural differences. And so even though we faced some challenges, even though my pregnancy with Josh was very difficult, I had preterm labor from the second month, I was making emergency flights up to Moscow monthly because of difficulties with my pregnancy. And we wanted to have solidarity with the people by having our baby in country. I could have gone out to another European country and had my baby there, but I wanted to be there with the Russians and go into the hospital just like they did in Russia.
I would say you have to have an incredible trust in God to be able to carry that out, because you know that you're going to be far away from family. I mean, you're almost half a world away from your family members.
We were living at a guest flat in Moscow awaiting the birth of Josh. It was a couple of weeks before he was born, and we'd had a series of threatening phone calls, and we knew that we were being followed. They thought I was alone in the apartment that morning, but plans were changed at the last moment. As it turned out, I wasn't, and Doug was there, and so a scuffle occurred at the door of this very large man with his head wrapped in some sort of cloth with little eye holes cut out.
Really, the scariest part for me was to be able to open that door and a guy reach around and grab my throat.
His hands were in these very large rubber black gloves, and he grabbed Doug by the neck when he was forcing his way in. And I, not thinking the fact that I was 9 months pregnant, ran to help Doug because he was clearly in the losing position, and this assailant was going to get in the apartment. So I ran to help.
And she tripped and fell. I know when I slammed the door, it was something beyond me that gave me the strength to be able to slam that door, because I was losing. So that's where I know that it was a God-given strength.
So we were targeted because I was almost full term in my pregnancy. We actually didn't completely understand until months later when we read some English articles in the Moscow Times newspapers about these crime rings, and that they were actually cutting the babies out of full-term pregnant women and selling them on the black market. You can get about $20,000 to $30,000 for a healthy baby in Russia.
My name's Joanne Rusatz. I do research with child prodigies, and right now I believe there's a moderator gene that in the event of an injury or illness to the left hemisphere kicks in place and starts shutting down the gene. His mother reports having a fall right before he was born, so that could have caused some left hemisphere damage too. And I was looking for art prodigies because they're the rarest, and Josh's name was there and it was so close.
The next week, she hightailed it up here to Canada through a super intense blizzard, and came to her house and did extensive IQ tests, AQ tests, DNA tests, and she knew right away within the first 10 minutes of meeting us that she affirmed that we were prodigies. And we said that I have a younger brother named Zach, who happens to be a musician and composer.
I call them acquired prodigies because Zach shows no deficits. He just has this amazing skill that happened after a left hemisphere injury, which is, if there's going to be an acquired savant, often there's illness or injuries or dementia in the exact same part of the left hemisphere, and I believe it provides for individuals with a rare mutant gene to develop right hemisphere compensation for their left hemisphere damage.
With Zach, he was always kind of an ADD type. He went from one activity to another, and he was always very scattered and always couldn't really concentrate on one thing for a long time, whereas Josh, right from the start, was so focused. With Zach, it wasn't until he had a series of concussions, and the worst of which happened when he was 13.
Doing music was actually one of my least favorite subjects, and I really hated kind of the formulaicness of it. It wasn't until 13 that I had that bad concussion that I kind of began a passion of mine for music and was focused on one thing. I hadn't been focused on anything in particular until that point.
We would see the reaction to Zach's composing when Dr. Rusatz came. By then, he'd composed 16 full-length compositions by the time he turned 16. And we kind of figured that was probably a little unusual. She just confirmed what we were sort of thinking.
Albert Einstein's parents and his teachers thought he was mentally retarded. And it turns out that he had this wonderful skill for mathematics. So each story is different, just like each person is different.
Well, I mean, it was hard enough to think, okay, one of your kids has this capability or this gene, and to think two of them have it, that to us was like, it just was mind-blowing.
I'm going to guess about 1 in 5 million to maybe 1 in 10 million children are a prodigy. Having 2 in one family is extraordinarily unusual.
I had been called a prodigy through the press and media throughout the years, but my parents and I never knew to really take it seriously. I don't think it changes the way I act or treat people. I'm still the same person I was before being called a prodigy.
It was a little awkward at first, being put on this pedestal of, you're elite or you're special, and I'd always feel like I was just a normal person and that I fit in amongst my peers. It was kind of a shock to both of us that we were considered prodigies. It kind of put a big initial burden on us.
Hey, Elsa!
I started getting sick in September of '99, and they said, well, what happened in September of '99? I said, well, I don't know. We had a guard dog. Well, what about the guard dog? Well, it used to go pheasant hunting. Oh, it's, you know, when a dog runs through thistles, you see these little things stuck in their fur, and I thought, oh, isn't that too bad? You know, Elsa got covered with all these thistles. And so I went to start picking off the thistles. And really, we started realizing these aren't thistles. These are actually, we found out later, engorged female ticks. And so picked them all off, not realizing much about it. And then finally, we came back to Canada. And I started in a new job in Toronto in 2004. And my body, every 6 weeks, was having like a cycle. Like I just felt flu-like symptoms. Make a long story short, after about 18 specialists, I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, which was contracted way back in '99, not even knowing it, because not even knowing what it was. But then further research found that Lyme ticks, there was an infestation of them in 1999 in that region of Russia.
Doug was diagnosed finally in 2008, about a decade after he contracted it. Back then, the boys and I didn't have too many symptoms. We had things like the boys were breaking bones really easily. I was starting to have more and more brain fog, memory issues, pain, but I kind of ignored it because my husband was sick and our focus was on getting him better. When you're the mom, I mean, the mom can't get sick, right? That's how it is, because you're trying to look after the rest of the family. So it was another 3 years before I was diagnosed in 2011, and it was another year after that before both boys were diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease.
I kind of feel sometimes just a mental fog, and I can't think as clearly as I used to. So that's something that I just have to cope with, and I said the fatigue, just getting my rest and knowing that I can't burn the candle at both ends, and while other kids my age maybe can and go on a little amount of sleep, that I just have to pace myself.
They have to just be careful, you know. You don't want to treat yourself like so fragile, but on the other hand, if this is their livelihood, both of them, their hands are now their livelihood. So we have to protect that. Not be paranoid, but you know, be careful.
Sometimes in bad circumstances, good things can come out of it, because if we hadn't been grounded in Canada, I wouldn't have been discovered by an artist or on my way to an art career by 16, or had the chance to have exhibitions or speak through the media. And so that the whole concept of beauty from ashes, I try to encourage people that good circumstances can come out of the worst experiences in our lives.
Long-term antibiotics is very controversial, and the type of, or the dosage range is controversial. But acute stages, because of the testing is lacking in Ontario, and that there's a lot of false negatives with it, and a lot of people claim that they do have Lyme disease, and some of them do, absolutely. That's the issue, is that they're slipping through the cracks because our testing is not, I wouldn't use the word valid, but it's not sensitive enough. A lot of the Lyme patients here in Canada have to go to the US or have to go to out of country for treatment.
We thought, wow, this would be the place. Their success rate is like 90%. It's around 80,000 per person. So we're on our way to raising the funds. People have asked us, well, what about OHIP? Won't OHIP cover you? Not 1 cent. Then somebody from our church really was impassioned and said, you know what, we need to do something more for the Tiessens. And so she had a big fundraiser at her farm and so on and so forth. And so it's just grown to the place where now people are supporting it, and we're raising funds to be able to go down there.
We trust that they'll be able to use our condo for several months if and when the funds become available for them to have the Lyme treatments that they'd like to obtain there. And we've offered our condo to them for whatever length of time they need.
And so the type of treatment that they use is a combination of antibiotics as well as naturopathic. Some people even said it's kind of like chemo. Like you go through this and you have the after effects of all of that.
It's pretty aggressive, and you generally feel worse before you feel better. But I definitely would want to continue doing my art. It's something I enjoy and am passionate. It would be hard if I wasn't able to do it. I definitely think that there is a hope and joy even within the sickness and the hard times for my parents. A lot of that has been to do just having a supportive church family. Just our Christian faith has also helped us continue and to stay positive. And we see everything that happens in our lives as an opportunity to be able to connect with others who are maybe going through a hard time or a struggle, and kind of seeing that light. One of my paintings, Glimmer of Hope, is of a great blue heron, and it's flying through this turbulent storm, and yet it has this light at the bottom left of the painting that it's flying into. And those themes of the light at the end of the tunnel, and that concept comes through even in my art.
I think as parents, we always feel like we're biased to our children. But when we see strangers come up and react to Josh's work in such awe and wonder over it, I think for me, those are the moments that you go, wow, this is something really special and unique. And it really convinces you that you're not just being biased, that this really is something special.
I think that it definitely has brought us close as a family, this disease. It's kind of a weird aspect of the Cygnus field to actually inspire people by just the way we live our lives, and that we're unified still throughout going through those hard years.
You know, it's exciting to look back over our lives, and it's been a hard time since, like, for the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, where since I've been off from work, from medical reasons, and to see all of those things. But on the other side, it's been a blessing to be home with the boys and to be able to see the developments in them. So, we put this all together and we go, all right, where is the future? If we could get our treatment and get the boys treated so that they could be healthy and have a really good, healthy life, who knows where that's going to take them. And I think for ourselves, we just want to be able to help them. And we just feel blessed, really, that we've had this opportunity to be together as a family, to see God work in crazy ways to enable us to be able to live, to be able to buy a house, and to be able to see our boys go into a career, into different careers, and to see where the future holds. We don't know, but we know that God's going to guide us in that direction.